Welcome to a new week. We will be looking at early childhood cognitive development this week. So we will continue in the 2 to 6-year-old stage and be talking primarily about brain development, cognitive skills, and thought processes and how all of that develops over time in this stage. Just a reminder here to keep working on your research projects, so they are due soon. You guys submitted amazing outlines last week and some drafts, and I am thankful for that. It sounds like you guys are all on the right track to writing a good paper. I would encourage you not to wait until the last minute. This is a big chunk of your grade, and so if you wait to submit it late, of course, the late deduction is going to impact your points. So I would encourage you to submit. If you can't finish, submit the most that you can, whatever you can, get as much done as possible, and submit on time so that you're able to get the most credit out of that assignment. The other thing is if you wait and you haven't scheduled your observation right away, things can happen with that, as you know, unexpected things or change of plans. And so I want to really make sure that you guys have the time to write a good paper and reflect on your two favorite theorists, or the two theorists that you were interested in researching for this assignment. So anyways, we're going to get started. We'll be talking about cognitive development, as I mentioned. Our primary theorists for this week are going to be Piaget and Vygotsky, two of our kind of biggest cognitive theorists. Piaget will be looking at the second stage of development, which is pre-operational. Vygotsky will, of course, be looking at his theory through the lens of culture and how that influences children's development. And we'll talk some about language. Language is actually a pretty big part of cognitive development. They go hand in hand in some ways, and so we'll look at those connections so you guys can understand that. And then we'll also talk about STEM and how important that is for cognitive development in young children, and then children's theories, which is kind of interesting as well. We'll finish up with that. So just remember, 2 to 6 years old is the stage we're in. I would encourage you to reflect on last week and what you remember about biological development. We talked specifically about the brain and the rate at which it's growing, which is fast, okay? And we talked about how it's 90% of its adult weight by the end of this stage. And so just keep in mind that as that brain is physically growing, a lot of different things are happening that contribute to that child's development. So Piaget's second stage is pre-operational. In this stage, children think symbolically and they use language. However, they're still very egocentric. So egocentric really means self-centered. They think primarily about themselves. They don't necessarily understand the impacts or the way that people around them think, or the differences in thinking. They're very primarily focused on themselves, but they can think symbolically. So they have a big use of imagination in this stage. Language becomes a way of expressing themselves. They have some social influence via their use of language, such as they can communicate their wants and needs and desires. So just keep that in mind as we move forward, and you'll see a couple of videos that you'll see actual examples of children thinking symbolically in pre-operational stage and what that actually looks like. And that should help you guys to understand more about what it looks like and what happens. So things they can do in pre-operational intelligence stage. They can use their imaginations. They use language. Egocentrism means, again, that the world revolves around them. Their thought processes usually include only themselves. So if they want something, or they think something's a good idea, or they've decided something, or they feel a certain way about something, a pretty normal thing in this stage is for them to associate that with everyone. So for example, one of my kids one year gave me bubblegum and batteries for Christmas, because in his 3-year-old mind, the most amazing things you could have is batteries for that toy that's not working, and bubblegum was highly desirable, right? So he gave me bubblegum and batteries, and that's because of that egocentric way of thinking. If it sounds good to him and his mind and what he would want, then the natural association with that is that other people would want the same thing. So they haven't really developed logical thinking or reasoning yet, such as maybe mom doesn't want batteries because she has a whole cabinet full of them, right? Or mom's allowed to chew gum whenever she wants, so it probably wouldn't be as big a deal for mom to get this as it is for me. They can't do that. And so one of the really important things to remember with preschoolers is that when we get frustrated with them as parents or as teachers, they can't help it. They don't have the ability to actually think differently or think more logically. And so when they do things that seem very silly or out of control, or like maybe bad behaviors, it's usually not intentional. It's usually simply because of what their brain is doing and the way that they're learning. They cannot make logical connections between varying ideas, so they won't understand assumptions, and they won't understand how to infer things in a conversation or from a story. They really have a very difficult time seeing things from a different perspective. So one of the things you'll see often in this stage also that's very common and normal is that they tell fibs, right? So if they throw a ball in the house and break a vase, and you come in and ask them what happened, they're going to tell you someone else did it. Okay, and that's because they don't have logical thinking, which means like if they have chocolate on their face, you're going to see it, and obviously they're going to be caught, right? They can't do that, and so this is not a sign of unintelligence, like we've talked about several times with Piaget's theory. It's just simply a sign of what's actually happening in developmentally, and it's all very, very normal. So that's important to keep in mind. So you'll have this video in your model you can watch of this little guy, and it really demonstrates egocentrism and not being able to see things from a different perspective. So you guys will see how that plays out. He's the cutest little guy, and you'll see that in the video when you watch it. So the other thing that comes up in this stage of Piaget's theory is a concept called conservation. And so I want you guys to, you'll see a video related to this as well, and I want you guys to think about the question based on what I just told you about their thinking abilities and skills. Why do they answer this question incorrectly, okay, when they're asked the conservation question? So you'll see that and you'll be able to reflect on that later on. So what does symbolic thought actually look like? Symbolic thought is the understanding that words refer to things that we don't see. So they can know words and remember words in their mind that pertain to things that are not immediately around them. So remember we talked about object permanence in the past, and once they've developed that object permanence, they do know that things exist even when they're not right around them. And so this is kind of an expansion on that way of thinking. They know that they can use words for things that aren't around them. They can ask for things that aren't necessarily right around them or visible to the eye. And that becomes very important. The other thing is they understand that items or words or pictures can symbolize something else. So for example, a flag can symbolize a country. The McDonald's logo, those arches, they know symbolizes a Happy Meal, right? Starbucks symbolizes coffee. So this becomes a really, really important part of development in this stage. When they're little, they have no language, and so words don't really have meaning, right? You talk to them, but they don't understand yet, and so things don't have meaning. Once they've developed some language in this stage, they see a dog and they know that it's called a dog, and so they can say it. Once they've developed symbolic thought, which is even deeper thinking ability, they know that the family dog that's running around the house is a dog, a plastic toy dog is a dog in a book is a dog. And so basically it's just a way of generalizing the concepts that they already know and applying them in different areas of life. And so as you can imagine, obviously, this is extremely, extremely important culturally. This is a big deal for them. And it's very, very important that that as they develop this, they have the opportunities to read books and talk about things and have someone speak to them, expand on their language, practice with it, and basically just get used to having the ability to think about those things and talk about those things. So there are some limitations in thinking, and these are explained in your textbook and also online. You'll have some resource links. But these are 4 limitations in thinking that apply to the way that they think, okay? So each of these has different examples in the book. A lot of them are just how they sound, okay? So centration is when you really focus on just a central concept or idea and you can't think outside the box. Focus on appearance is if something doesn't look right, it's not right, right? So this happens with toys, with hair, with clothes. You'll hear preschoolers or young kiddos say, no, it's not right. I don't like it. You need to fix it, right? Or for example, my son will tell me, can you draw me a dog? And I draw a dog and he says, no, that's not a dog. It doesn't look right, right? And so they really focus on just what they can see in front of them. Literally what you see is what you get, and they cannot really think outside the box. Static reasoning is a very specific way of thinking about something, so very similar to the idea of egocentrism, and they really can't think any differently about that. Whatever conclusion they've drawn, that's basically it. You just can't think any differently about it. They don't have the ability to logically reason or make different conclusions. And then irreversibility is the idea that once something has happened, it cannot be changed or undone. So if the ice cube melts, it's the end of the world, right? Well, maybe it is, or maybe we can refreeze it. If there's pickles on the hamburger, then we have a few of these come into play, right? Focus on appearance, irreversibility. You can't fix the hamburger even by taking off the pickle because the pickle was on it. It's unchangeable, it's broken, it's ruined, they can't eat it, right? So if you've ever been around a preschooler, you will know and be familiar with a lot of these things and probably have heard them say them. And again, they're not signs of intelligence or lack of intelligence. They're just normal ways of thinking. This is just how every child develops over time and how they start to think about things. So as we move into Lev Vygotsky, remember, he is the pioneer of the sociocultural perspective, and so he believes that development results from interaction, social and cultural forces. And so obviously, as we're talking about language and cognitive development, that's huge, right? So we need to be talking to them, we need to be thinking about things with them, we need to be processing things, answering questions. They'll all go through that infamous why stage, why, over and over and over in this age range, usually preschool age. And so all of that's normal. They need that guided participation. They learn from others, directly and indirectly with what they see in the environment around them. And so these are all just important pieces of that thinking process. And so I personally think that Piaget and Vygotsky's theories go together beautifully. They really just build off each other so well. Piaget is telling us all the things we know about how they're going to develop, how their brain is actually physically going to develop, and how they're going to learn to think over time. And Vygotsky really gives us some of the reason and rationale behind it, right? Yeah, maybe some of it's natural development, but more likely a lot of it happens based on what they're exposed to. And we see this in kids with delays or disabilities, if they've been in foster care or neglected in some way or not spoken to, which we've watched in a video in class already, that's going to influence their success. And so we really have to make sure that we are aware of that and we're cognizant of that, and that we are good mentors who provide good scaffolding, and can support them over time with whatever they need to learn. We've talked about this a little bit, but it really comes up for the first time here in this stage officially for Piaget. So just a reminder, in the zone of proximal development, we're wanting to offer assistance in this stage. It's very, very important for them to have the ability and the time to do some self skills where they can try things on their own, where they can practice things on their own. That is extremely important for them. It's vital to their success and to their ability to learn. And so they have to have some experiences where they try new things. Maybe they have some support or some assistance added. Maybe they fail and we help them succeed later on, but we really want to empower them to be successful, encourage motivation, provide assistance and support as needed, and make sure we're giving challenges that are developmentally appropriate. So not things that are too hard, but also things that can provide a good, healthy challenge for them, because that's how they learn a lot of things that they need for kindergarten. Persistence and not giving up on things, continue trying, failing's okay, right? They learn so many things from this. So scaffolding, just as a reminder, is a temporary support. Okay, so we offer support temporarily to support their needs or their learning or their drive. Joint engagement is really the key here. So we need the child and the mentor to be actively involved together. So the parent kind of really engaged or involved, or the teacher actively responding, actively adding in that support, and then the child having opportunities to talk, to work through things, to fail, to succeed, all of the above. So just a prompt here, the zone of proximal development, what do you remember about that? Okay, and you guys answered some questions about that in the past. And book reading. So book reading is hugely important to their success in this stage, so important. And so interestingly, in different cultures, there are different ideas about book reading. And so this obviously plays in very well to Vygotsky's theory. Americans, typically the child participates in reading. So they expand ideas, we ask them questions, we talk about things on the pages, we point things out, right? It's a very engaging kind of instrumental process, reading a book and engaging with the child. It's not about getting through the book as much as it is spending the time together and talking about it. Chinese Americans typically will point out problems encountered by characters because of misbehavior. So, oh, do you see what happened because they did ... or whatever? And then Mexican Americans typically are more likely to highlight emotions that characters might be feeling. So just kind of an interesting point of notice there for book reading, and the differences that even reading a book can have among different cultures, and the impacts that those are going to have among a child's development. So as we move into language here, private speech is normal in this stage, and private speech literally is when they talk to themselves. So you will hear preschool age kiddos just going on and on and on about something in the other room, totally by themselves. That's completely normal. The development of an imaginary friend in this stage is also normal. STEM education is extremely important, and you guys will have a video in your module related to this. This is the best time to introduce STEM concepts and ideas. Preschool is the absolute best time. They're naturally driven learners and engaged anyways in wanting to learn, and so this is such a great time to introduce that concept and get them more familiar with STEM and with those kind of activities and perhaps develop an interest in pursuing that later on. Lots of research behind STEM and the demand for it by 2020. Now, of course, we've surpassed it, so we know this, but by 2020, the demand for STEM professionals added over 1 million new STEM jobs, right? So we're talking Google and Facebook, and I mean, you name it, everything's shifted online. And so we just know that we have to continue producing STEM professionals in order to function in our society. There will be another video related to STEM specifically in a preschool classroom. So you'll see some ideas of how STEM can look. This one, of course, here is a balancing activity on a scale, okay, looking at the weights of things. And then theory of mind is something else that's kind of interesting that develops during this stage. This is going to happen closer to the end of this stage, so really closer to 6, maybe even 7 years old. And they really just start to understand that other people think differently than they do. So it develops very slowly over time. Occasionally we can see it at age 4. So for example, in a classroom, if a child hits somebody, you can ask them, why did you do that? Or why did you hit them? Or what happened? And they might be able to tell you. If you ask them, how do you think that your friend felt when you did that? They might be able to tell you. They understand people like different things, right? So this is a very, very important stage of development and process that happens for them. So there's an experiment that was done some years ago, and you guys will have the link to that. It's very, very interesting experiment with M&Ms and the responses that children had to that experiment. So you guys will have a video related to that, and you can watch it. A video or the data related to this, and you can look at that. It's very interesting the way that children respond based on how much their theory of mind has actually developed. So there's another video demonstrating theory of mind in a child who's a couple children, but who are developing the skill and haven't fully developed it yet. It is supported by executive function, which we talked a little bit about last week. It's further developed more quickly for children who have an older sibling present. Or additional interaction and exposure to people, or if culturally and contextually it was something that was brought up. So for example, if in reading books the parent does mention how people feel frequently, that child's going to be able to develop theory of mind sooner than one who doesn't. And it also correlates pretty closely with language development. We should see a vocabulary explosion in this stage. So at 2 years, they have about a 500-word vocabulary, and at 6 years, they have over 10,000. And so there's a huge, huge explosion, obviously, a big difference between 2-year-olds and 6-year-olds and what they know and the language that they have. In early childhood schooling and settings specifically, a teacher-directed approach versus a child-centered approach, they're just two different ways of teaching. Teacher-directed is when the teacher is really giving directions, telling the children what to do. The focus is on basically accomplishing what the teacher wants them to. And a child-centered approach is more focused on individual needs, development, growth. And so we would expect much more child-centered activities and behavior in a preschool classroom than teacher-directed. They should be able to choose what they want to do, where they want to play, how they want to learn, what activities they want to participate in. There is, of course, a time when teachers need to give directions or some feedback or information, but for the most part, we really want to see them in child-directed activities. That's a high-quality preschool experience. And that's it for this week. So I hope you guys learned something. If you have questions about this week's module, let me know. And I will talk to you again next week.